Man, let's talk some Pittsburgh Steelers football. I'm excited, man.
You gotta love it, right? I mean, the offseason's right around the corner. But hey, when fans reach out and they are, sincere in their request, we get right to you and we'll get right on it.
Absolutely. I think we're going to definitely do a little overview on the Steelers, give them some love today. Definitely going to be doing much deeper deep dives into these teams as the offseason goes, as we see free agent signings, give analysis on that, and kind of see the direction of where the team's headed. But yeah, man, I'm excited to get into this.
Of course, we'll do one for every single team, so be on the lookout for your team. All right, Forr, I believe we need to go over their position needs, any possible coaching changes, fan concerns from the Steelers, and what are their expectations for next season? All right, where would you like to start?
Well, all those are great points to start on. I do want to say, look, it's important to look at this season that they have had, that they're coming off of, right? And I wouldn't define it as necessarily a success, but what I would define it as is simply a young team trying to figure out their new identity, coming off the years of having Big Ben at quarterback and the consistency at that position. We saw it with Mitch Trubisky this year, trying to take the reins. Then we saw it, obviously, with Kenny Pickett. So I think probably the best way to start off would just be, how would you define their season?
I'm not sure how to define their season. I think you're right. Very young team, a lot of growing pains. And yet they still somehow had a winning record, right? Coach Mike Tomlin, I've got to give him a lot of credit. He's also the most tenured coach in the league as is. Or actually, besides Belichick. But it just seems like I don't know how he gets it done in terms of all of these winning seasons. He's never had a losing season for. How is that?
He's the definition of consistency. You kind of just touched on it there. I mean, look at what he does year in, year out. In a world where having a quarterback change in a season's frowned upon, or usually due to an injury or unprovenness, he was still able to win and have a winning record. I mean, that's very impressive, especially having the rookie quarterback that he did come in, and lack of production, I would say, from Kenny Pickett this year. It's just incredible what he does.
Completely remarkable. To touch on Kenny Pickett taking over, right? Again, they gave Trubisky the chance, but it wasn't there, right? I mean, the same thing that happened at Chicago happened here. Very talented, very athletic, but just can't make certain throws. This will be year 2 in Coach Matt Canada's offense. And one of the crazy stats is they were averaging about 18 points a game. That's not going to cut it.
Absolutely. And with Canada, it's one of those things. They're showing loyalty by keeping him this season. And I think that's, or at least this offseason so far. And I think that's important to note, man. A lot of loyalty shown for the coaching staff there in Pittsburgh.
Right. And which is great to see because, again, one of the toughest obstacles for these young rookie quarterbacks and young quarterbacks is consistency, right? Like, let's stay in the same offense for a few years and then see where they go. Another thing that's very positive for Pittsburgh, still got Najee Harris, young 24-year-old running back, a lot of mileage left. They're very young at wide receiver as well. George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and Pat Freiermuth, who's technically a tight end, but he's always lining up outside. I think they need to get a veteran wide receiver to help support Kenny Pickett. When I was thinking about this, a couple of names that came to my mind. First and foremost, Allen Lazard. That could be great. And Jarvis Landry would actually be a terrific help for this Pittsburgh crew.
Yeah, man. I love it. I love the addition there of potentially adding either a Lazard. I'm not necessarily sure that he would fit in culture-wise. He's kind of shown a lot of bad body language, man, how he kind of handled his exit from Green Bay. So I'm not necessarily sure I would want to bring that into a locker room. But I will say, Landry, man, who doesn't love the juice, right? And let's be honest, that would be something that we could absolutely see. A playmaker out on that left side out there to help kind of the big plays for Pickett. I don't hate it.
But we also know that Coach Mike Tomlin loves players with passion. Landry loves football, and I think that would be a tremendous fit. Another sleeper option I had, Noah Brown, receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. He had some really good games where he popped off, and this was actually a career year for him as well, with very minimal targets. I think he'd be great for Pittsburgh.
I could see that. I could see that. Then maybe not going with the big name necessarily, but then going with somebody who has a lot of potential. That's kind of the Steelers' way. That's kind of what they did with Antonio Brown back in the day when they drafted him, let him develop. So I like that a lot. I think you've got some good options there.
Yes, and regarding coaching changes, got to keep Coach Mike Tomlin, and they have kept Coach Matt Canada as well, right? So consistency, and it'll be interesting to see. They're in a tough division, but hey, I think the Steelers, they could surprise some people next year.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I will say, I saw you went at wide receiver pretty heavy there. I had some other additions to the team that I thought that could really help them. Starting off with the defensive side of the ball, I actually really like Poona Ford, former D tackle for Seattle. He's a free agent. He could find his way to Pittsburgh. He could help with the aging veteran Cam Hayward. And being able to help with that the D line, the defensive tackle position, it would add depth right away. And he is a playmaker. That said, too, you've got Steelers, Ogunjobi, and Wormley all set to become free agents at that exact position. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Poona Ford, defensive tackle, coming over.
All right. Yes, I like that. The other part also that I do think we should touch on, since this will help the rest of the support that we go for. Their biggest needs, in my opinion, at the positions, it's got to be offensive line in particular, right? And if you can get another guard, another tackle, that'd be great. Well known that they're going to lose their corner Cam Sutton. He'll be getting paid, and it won't be by Pittsburgh. So they're going to have to do what the Jets did last year, but the Jets also had a top pick. They're going to have to hit on a corner in the draft, and Seattle did it as well. So I think Pittsburgh can do it, and I'm excited to see if they can. And another position they're going to have to address, linebacker. How do you go about this? Do you think they just kind of patch it up and sign some veterans in the free agency market?
I'm so glad you brought up corner. That was actually the next position that I was going to bring up as well. I think that there is a great fit out there, and it kind of pains me as a Buccaneer fan to bring this up. But Jamel Dean from Tampa, he kind of fits what they're looking for at the corner position, and there's been some links to him with Pittsburgh. I've kind of seen it trending on Twitter a little bit when I've been tracking my Buccaneer free agents. So it is interesting. I could see Jamel Dean, kind of playing that role of being able to be a corner/hybrid safety. He kind of has played both in his career with Tampa as well as his collegiate career. So definitely a good fit. And with the Steelers, they kind of like those guys that can do multiple roles on that defense.
Yeah, and it's just a lot, right? And again, a lot of these holes, it's going to be just because it's a young team. They're going through a rebuild, but I don't know if they're going through a traditional rebuild because they won as many games as they did. Again, and it's remarkable because they were only averaging 18.1 points per game, which I know was a big fan concern. All right, like the fans do not like only putting up 18 points per game, especially coming off the era where they had the killer bees, where they were dropping about 30 points per game. Right, so that's a tough drop off.
Absolutely. They've got to look to replicate that in some form. It looks like they've already nailed it with Najee Harris at running back. They've got to find that wide receiver, which we've kind of given some options on, and maybe look at a potential bridge quarterback, or when I say bridge, maybe a developmental quarterback, a one-year signing, maybe a little bit higher quality than a Mitch Trubisky, somebody that can put those points up. I'm going to throw this out here. If he's cut, it's kind of hard to not like the prospect of Jameis Winston heading over to Pittsburgh. And the only reason I bring this up is you're telling me on this podcast that they're lacking scoring. Well, why not go get a guy who's thrown for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns in a season and see what you can do?
That's a great point. And Jameis, whether you like him or not, objectively, everyone can tell this guy loves football and he doesn't like coming off the field.
He screams a guy that Mike Tomlin would love to play with. I mean, I don't know if you have that vibe as well, but just the passion Tomlin shows, I could see him easily working, especially with that Pittsburgh team. him coming over there for 1 year, probably going to be around similar money that you could expect to have paid a Mitch Trubisky. I think he's light years ahead of a Mitch Trubisky in talent. And if Mike Tomlin, the definition of consistency, can work these bad plays out of Jameis, maybe a 1 year turns into multiple years. Who knows? But Jameis kind of knows his role, too, of being a 1 year style quarterback. I think if that's a marriage to watch out for in the offseason.
Yes, and I think one of the attributes, too, that really makes Tomlin, his level of discipline. I don't know how he balances everything, right? Because he's technical. The players love him. And yet he's a disciplinarian. All right, so I don't know how he must be really charismatic, and the players love him, and they play hard for him, and that's how you have the longevity that you have, right? So he seems to really have the formula down for coaching hires.
For him to be able to keep an Antonio Brown on that team for the years that he did and not have the headache after headache after headache and keep that in the organization is very impressive. The Raiders couldn't even do it for a simple offseason, so it just shows you there's levels to the organizations and how they're ran, and a lot of credit needs to be had for Mike Tomlin.
Well, also with Le'Veon Bell, right? Bell left for the Jets.
Absolutely.
And I almost forget that he played for the Jets, right? I mean, that's how forgettable he was outside of Pittsburgh.
Well, it's interesting. He did actually go to he went to the Chiefs, and when he went to the Chiefs, he actually badmouthed the organization pretty heavy and talked about how Andy Reid wasn't a quality, competent coach. And so it once again, just another personality in that room. It's very interesting that Mike Tomlin's able to manage it seemingly better than anyone else in the National Football League.
Yeah, I don't know. He's got the right fit of intimidation and likability, right? So he's got the balance, and that's impressive. One thing, though, I do think this offense has to be putting up more than 18 points a game this upcoming season if they plan on winning more than 9 games. And especially with an aging defense as well. They had injuries this year, but the offense really can do more.
You're 100% right. And the last thing I want to say in touching in on with Tomlin here is let's just keep him away from the sidelines, man, because we know he's a great tackler, man, on those kick returns. But I wanted to just chime in here, man, going from tackler to tackling. Let's go back to the offense here. I think I have a great fit for them at offensive tackle, and I wanted to touch on it. Jawan Taylor from the Jags, he is 25. He's got a lot of potential, and he is a great depth fit for the Steelers. He's going to improve that offensive line. He was drafted out of Florida, solid player, extremely durable. He started all 66 games that he's played in, and the Jags may want to re-sign him, but there's a potential opportunity that he will be a free agent. I think the Steelers should invest and try to go all in and get a guy that definitely can play their tackle spot.
Forr, I can't believe you went there, man. You dissed Coach Mike Tomlin, and I can't believe you had the wherewithal to do it, man. So you better hope he doesn't hear this. But yeah, I think that makes good sense to me. I'm right there for it. The only thing I can really touch on about Pittsburgh is it just seems that they're the second or third or fourth best team in this division. Okay, so they were kings of the AFC North for so long, and it doesn't appear to be that anymore. You have Burrow, you have Lamar for now, and quite honestly, do you believe that Pickett is the guy for Pittsburgh? Is that fact?
I absolutely do not believe he is the guy, and I'm not going to try to diss him because we have such a small sample size. I wasn't a fan of his in college, so I'm not going to sit here and act like I think he's a franchise guy. What I will say, though, in credit of Pittsburgh and why Pittsburgh fans should feel very excited, you have a top defense in the NFL. You have a top 5 to 10 running back with a very young age. He's got a lot of mileage left on those tires. And the other thing I wanted to say, they still are winning games at this point in their rebuild. You need to understand, 9-8, a lot of teams would kill to be 9-8. So you got to appreciate that they're still competitive. They can win any divisional game on any week. They showed that this season. And look, the Browns are the Browns. They're kind of a dumpster fire. I'd take the Steelers before I'd take the Browns. And who knows with this Lamar Jackson situation, what's truly going on in Baltimore? They're consistent as well, but if they lose Lamar, Pittsburgh could find themselves back into number 2 in the division, only chasing the Bengals.
Wow, great takeaway. And yeah, I would say my closing statement